And I think that's the demand we were answering for a long time. But till we partnered with Neighborgood, it was very much just that, and just they're affordable bedrooms, so people are going to take them. But we're excited about what partnering with you guys is. You're actually bringing something else to the table in terms of the connected city, in terms of the spirit and the vibe of the whole thing, in terms of the user experience.
Hello and welcome to the Real Good podcast by Neighborgood, a podcast designed for the next generation of property entrepreneurs and investors, where our guests share their stories, their tactics, and everything in between for all things property and entrepreneurship related. Today, we have two extra special guests all the way from California who are working with us in our expansion plans over in the US. Dan and Shane from YoungLewin Advisors. Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good to have you.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah,
man, again, what a journey it's been so far. I'm really confident that it's going to be the beginning of something awesome that we built together.
Definitely.
I hope we can reshoot this podcast again in 10 years' time.
Look back.
Hopefully we're all looking fit and healthy.
Yeah.
Welcome to Cape Town. I know you guys, it's the first time you've been here. Thank you for getting on such a long flight to be here.
Well worth it.
24 hours in total, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah. Long trip.
Good.
But worth it. Beautiful city.
Thank you.
And the cold plunge this morning really woke us up.
Cold plunge.
Yeah.
The Vim Hub thing.
Yeah.
I want to jump straight into deals because that's why we're here. We're building something cool with you guys. We're looking at raising capital in the US for these exciting work that you guys are doing in this ADU space in California. For context, again, the ADU laws were introduced because there's a requirement for affordable housing in the state of California, and I think it's spinning over to other states as well. And we have launched a co-living portfolio with the YoungLewin guys in Redwood City, which we manage for and on behalf of them. It's been a process of about a year to a year and a half where we've really worked through a lot of the detail using a combination of old school, new school property management principles, trying to understand in context how Neighborgood as a product and as a brand could fit the context of our Redwood properties and potentially others in Long Beach and as we continue to expand. But on the investment side, which is on the PropCo side of what we're up to, that is where the magic really happens. Outside of the customer experience, which on the front end is a work in progress for us, because overall what we're trying to do is connect three core pillars: living space, working space, and experience in a single product offering within a clearly defined core geography, leveraging, again, a combination of old school, new school principles, driving experience at every level, making it super simple, affordable, accessible for people to rent, and then cross-pollinating those three pillars. So you have access to workspaces across the city. If you rent with us at any of our properties, you have access to events and activations across the city, all for no additional cost. So that is the rationale, and that's the process that we're on with you guys.
Connected city.
A connected city product offering, man, all the way from Cape Town to Redwood City, San Francisco.
Future is good.
Exactly, man. And so, but I want to look at the deal side specifically just to really simplify for our audience why you guys are onto something good. Excuse the pun. Tell us about how the ADU arbitrage and the single family acquisition model that you guys have employed works, Dan.
Yeah, I mean, the state of California changed the laws around this, and they've been tweaking it to make it even more attractive over the last 5 years. It started in 2019, but it's basically, for a long time in California, the NIMBYs, the not in my backyard, people have been able to stymie development and housing development in particular. And, everybody acknowledges the need for more housing, but everybody gets to control it locally in their city. And so they conclude that not in my backyard, but the other cities are welcome to do it. And so Gavin Newsom, our governor, and the state legislature eventually wised up and said, we're going to have to take some of the local control away in a limited capacity enforce that everybody's got to build their fair share of housing. And so what they've basically said is cities have to allow these accessory dwelling units, these units in typically the rear of properties. And so it kind of quietly but effectively abolished single family zoning in the state of California and made everything at least a duplex site. And that's super, super valuable. Real estate insider trading is legal in real estate is an expression I like. And it wasn't like that was, broadly published that, hey, every house now has a development site in the backyard.
Mm-hmm.
We've just been able to realize it. And the market is catching on to some extent, but not nearly as much as it should be. And so essentially we're able to buy a house, expand the house and add more bedrooms. Typically we make everything a master bed bath. Also able to build a whole new unit in the backyard that also will have 2 to 5 bedroom bathrooms in it, that we rent either for student housing when we do it near a university, or like we're working on in Redwood City, by the bedroom co-living. And it's very valuable. I mean, we're able, in our markets, properties trade for a 4 to 5% cap rate, and we're able to build these to a 7 to 8% return on cost, untrended cap rate on cost, essentially, because our land basis is effectively free for these new developments, because the selling market just doesn't fully understand it. And we think that will continue for a while. It seems to have over the last 4 years, even since the laws were implemented.
What is the classification between, for our audience, single family and multifamily in unit numbers? We don't have such a big, as we were discussing, such a big multifamily investment, especially at an institutional level in this country. But in the US, it is your biggest. The whole multifamily sector is massive. And the level of institutional capital behind it is significant. The amount of people who have invested in it is huge. Why is that? What is the reason?
I think there's just a strong middle class in the U.S. And so it's, especially the younger generation, the millennials and the Gen Z that's coming up now, they're educated, they're not wealthy enough to necessarily buy their own single family house, but they're wealthy enough to rent and live in a nice apartment. And that's just accepted in our culture that's kind of where people go when they're, in university and afterwards, typically until you start a family, and then people will move to the house with the backyard and
I hear you.
The white picket
until
fence.
You buy it.
Yeah.
And then the sizing, so single family would be regarded as, say, 1 to 5 bedrooms, right?
There's some nuance to it. Anything 1 to 4 units being their own kitchen, their own unit, is technically, for the government financing programs, FHA financing is seen as single family. When I was talking about the model there, I use multifamily as anything 2 units and up, multi units.
Yeah.
But effectively rental properties is what we're talking about.
Okay.
Yeah.
Your cap raising process to date, I know that starting out is always a challenge. You guys come from a proper broking background where you understand real estate backwards. You've been in a partnership for one way or another almost 10 years. We, as a company, Neighborhood, that is, are completely self-funded, and we did that intentionally. We are in the process of now looking at capital for the US investments with you guys. I'd love to just understand, you guys have done it all yourself, which is probably the best way to do it because you learn on your own dime. Tell us about that process and how difficult it was to really raise funding with family and friends, and the process that you guys are going through at the moment as you look to the future for what you guys are building and what we potentially might be building with you guys as well.
It like you were insinuating, it's not the easiest thing in the world, but it's when we could explain the roadmap of a deal and explain how it's different and there's some value add that's unique versus just a typical apartment building, which is what a lot of our peers understand, and lipstick on the pig and trying to flip an apartment building. But there's this arbitrage where you're getting the land for free. There's no land basis and you're building on it and you're monetizing that and applying a cap rate to that. It's a significant return on cost. And I think that when you explain the whole story, and it was a new thing, so partly it's tough to get the point across when people are just used to the old way of investing, but adding that much value is compelling. And also we're putting our, at a minimum 10% of our own money in every deal.
Okay.
But a lot of times if we're, on our first couple deals, it was, this is going to take 6 months and we're going to refi it, at 12 months and this is going to be great. But then, we end up going a little bit over on costs and it takes longer and it wasn't as easy as we thought. But we have, some income from our brokerage business coming in and we could backstop the deals. So on a lot of deals, we're 20, 30%, even more on a couple of the cash in on the deals.
Cash in.
Right.
Got you. What are usual debt equity ratios on deals? If you can sort of guide us and our audience.
On the acquisition, it's typically probably 80% loan to cost. And we'll have, 20% cash equity down payment.
Got you.
Plus or minus. And then take out financing for deals that have gone full cycle. We're about 50% loan to value on the back end.
Got you. 80% is high, obviously. Is that debt and some mezz?
No, it's all
debt.
Yeah, it's all debt.
Seriously. Okay,
Yeah.
amazing.
There's some bridge lenders that understand the.
Okay.
We're creating a lot of value with the ADU program. So to take out that 80%,
I see.
it's 80% to cost, but it ends up being about 50%.
Of value.
value.
I hear you,
Yeah.
man. That makes sense. Average value deal size?
We would buy a typical property for $1 million and put between $500,000 to $1 million into it. So
Mhm.
yeah, about $400K is a typical equity raise, and then
On a bond, on a $1.5 million.
Yeah.
Or so.
Mhm.
Got you. Value post completion.
about 2.5 million, 2 to 3 million, depending on the size of the deal.
Got you. So
Yeah.
that value creation is close to 30% from what I can see between $1.5 and $2.5 million. And that's really a function of being able to acquire the sites where you're not paying for the bulk at the
Right.
back. So
We should be paying more
correct.
per market.
Yes. So you're losing a pool or you're losing a garage, but what you're gaining is land that you're not paying for. And then the cost to build is in and around the $300 to $400 a square foot mark.
Yep.
Mhm.
It was
Okay.
more like 200 to 300 a
200
few
to
years
300.
ago, but
Yeah.
now it's more like 300 to 400.
Got you.
It's interesting, the garage thing you mentioned, because people have been converting their garages illegally to residential for a long time in California. And it speaks to the demand, the underlying demand for that that's there.
Got you.
Now it's legal. Now you can do
Yeah.
it. And yeah, you lose a little bit of value that way,
I hear you.
but you gain so much with the
completely.
residential rental.
Especially in the student resi. And I mean, from a context perspective, obviously, student resi co-living doesn't need as much parking, and theoretically,
Mhm.
That's right.
I know that there is a need for it. It's still California. I guess it's not like high street stuff where people are taking a lot of public transport.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Public transport, does it exist as much? Like, I mean, like how often do people use it? How often are people using cars relative to Cape Town? What do you think?
Yeah, public transit is definitely a thing in the States. We have light rail lines that go. We have the Caltrain in Redwood City, bus lines. I think students use it, right?
Mhm.
Cal State Long Beach students take
Yeah,
the bus
you ride
to
for free.
campus
Yeah.
quite a bit.
It feels like the space that's a little bit undiscovered, and I know that comes with its challenges as well. Like multifamily is such a massive comp set, and the amount of people and companies chasing yield and chasing the same deals. The economics of both are quite similar because it's both the same client, really.
Mhm.
Yeah.
It's the same income. It's the same person paying rent in the single family ADU arbitrage model, which is essentially a smaller multifamily,
Small multi.
if that
Mhm.
makes sense,
Yep.
which also has its benefits because it costs less. On the other side, obviously, there's a lot more institutional appeal. Do you guys see the institutions coming into the space in the future? I mean, what is an
I
exit?
think that's the
Yeah.
wave we're hoping to catch. I think student housing as an asset class, at least in the U.S., has become a lot more mainstream. When I was starting as a broker 10 years ago, even, it was much more niche and sort of
Was it?
oddball to be in that. And I think when we've seen this with COVID, we have about a quarter of our portfolio in conventional multifamily, and we've had a really tough time collecting rents, doing evictions when people don't pay the rents. The laws are very, anti-landlord, especially in California. Without getting into the politics of it, just as a landlord, it's difficult to operate that.
Got you.
The student housing, the students have really high credit. Ironically, they don't themselves, and often they have no credit, but it's their parents who are signing for it, and the students
Yeah.
are there. They're not there to create trouble beyond the trouble students create, but they're going to pay their rent. They're going to, and so that part has become much more mainstream as an asset class. And then the scattered site, that we do, there's some operational challenges, you guys are helping us with on the co-living side, but managing 20 assets spread all around versus all in one place is different.
Yeah.
But that also has become more mainstream for the institutions, right? You look at, Colony and Tricon American Homes and Invitation Homes and all these big SFR REITs that have popped up in the last 10 years. That's a solved problem, and it's, we're solving it in our small scale way, but it's so those two things combined is what we're really pushing for. Up to this point, we've raised, like Shane was talking about earlier, we have 85 high net worth accredited investors. It was just our, friends and family, kind of, we're both in the real estate space. So we had a lot of people who were equipped to invest in real estate. I'm from Silicon Valley area. So we have some tech money that's invested in us and backed us. Now what we're trying to do is aggregate the portfolio and roll it up into one institutional joint venture. And so we're working with a capital advisor to go and basically roll up the initial portfolio and then back us programmatically going forward. Now that we have proof of concept, now that we've, gone full cycle on a few of these, stabilized, refinanced, sold a couple, we've got
you've actually seen
multiple years of rental history. It worked. It wasn't just a dream.
Yeah, I hear you, man.
Yeah.
Such is the journey that we've both been on.
When you're starting out, your friends and family believe in you.
Yes.
And that really is, it's people Shane's known his whole life. It's people I've known my whole life. My parents are large investors in it. My uncle's an investor in it. A couple of our title rep she's a rock star, Janine, and she's one of our big investors. People that know us, and they I think underwrite and analyze the model to some extent, but they're basically betting on the people,
on the humans.
No, on the humans. The institutions don't deal in humans; they deal in market studies,
track
record. And the humans may be the last step, but they're not just cutting 8-figure checks based on that. Yeah, so it's a different game.
Everyone's been running to the Sun Belt. That seems to be like the cool place to invest. Well, it doesn't seem to be. I guess it is. On the other side of it, we seeing stories that there might be too much going on and like rental pressure because of the amount of cash that's gone into building new ground up construction stuff.
100%.
Which is interesting because you guys have decided to focus in your hometowns, Redwood City and Long Beach, respectively. Specifically in Long Beach around universities. So that's been big, and around student resi, as you say. Tell us about that. That was quite strategic. Maybe you can sort of unpack that for us a little bit better.
In a simple way, it's, Dan and I did have multiple conversations about it because there are a lot of people that we know that we're going to the Sun Belt, but we don't, we'd have to fully understand those markets, I guess, to start. And, doing that research and getting out there, boots on the ground, it's just wasn't feasible, especially in our first few years of developing, because we have, there's enough hurdles and enough obstacles we have to navigate in our hometowns. And we're, fighting to keep our head above water and, make sure all the deals are sound and operating appropriately. And doing that, a couple states away would be pretty difficult.
What's our comparative advantage in the Sun Belt?
Yeah.
I've never really understood that. I mean, I understand the thesis behind investing out there.
Yes.
If I was an LP investor, I would not be inclined to invest in somebody based in California investing out there. I would go to somebody who's based out there, but we never felt like that made sense. And I think from our perspective, it's challenging no matter what you do. And as an investor, there's risk either way. In California, it's all infill lots. You're paying a high buy-in. You're battling cities that have these new state laws that they're not necessarily excited about having to implement. And there were definitely times where it looked to us like, man, the guys who are buying 200 unit, apartment complexes out in the Sun Belt and just spending $15K a unit to redo the carpet and the paint and the windows, that looks easier than battling out what we're doing. But as the market has shifted, you realize there's more competition out there where when demand is high, they've got open land to build, and they're development friendly, and so that's nice to developer when you're doing the development, but it allows competition to come in. In California, there's not available land. I mean, you've seen it in Redwood City. There's no just field on the outskirts of town that's just waiting for development, or if there is, somebody paid $50 million for it and they're about to do a big, so there's not that kind of, and what land is available is difficult to develop. And so fighting through that is our comparative advantage. We're on the ground. My dad's a structural engineer. We're in California. We're real estate agents in California. We're on the ground. We're doing it in our backyard. So we think we're better equipped to succeed here than elsewhere. And it worked in our thesis. And I think that's borne out over the as interest rates have shot up and you see a lot more distress in the middle of the country in the Sun Belt. We don't have that. I mean, our portfolio is sound. We don't have any debt maturity issues, any, deals that are underwater or even close to underwater. Certainly not on the debt, but not even on the equity. We're up on everything because California holds its value better. It appreciates better. It's worth being in. It's hard, but it's worth it. And, so,
and we actively talked about that early on. Is like, if we're building to a 7.5 to 8 cap or 7 to 8 cap in that range, what if rates start to do go up? And I'm not going to say we had a crystal ball and we were like expecting rates to go up, but it's always like on our first couple of deals when we're trying to scale in our small way of scaling, but trying to push scale as much as we can. What's the threat and what's, and conceptualizing that and then putting us in another state just didn't make sense.
Yeah.
And that did end up happening. I think the Fed raised rates 10 times, 11 times. And
seriously,
and it's significant. And if you're underwriting like in the Sun Belt, if you're underwriting to exit at a 5.5, 6 cap, but then, after the Fed increases their rates 11 times, market cap rate is north of that, for a stabilized deal. That's especially when you're raising $40 million, $50 million to do a deal and you have to cash in a few $1 million or more. Whereas, I think we positioned ourselves in a good way, sort of unknowingly, but doing smaller deals. So raising $400,000 versus $40 million. And, if we have to help the deal out, and add some cash in, it's possible.
Yeah.
And building to such a high cap rate, we had a large cushion for when cap rates did increase.
I mean, I think the cool thing as well is like, if you aggregate it, which I think is the way the market's going to go. I mean, there's big institutions behind student housing. I think co-living is on the up and up as well. You can see it with institutional raises. I mean, South Africa, we've got our biggest property fund and Growth Point has invested in a substantial student housing venture. So, and that's in South Africa. That doesn't really have a residential asset class. So you can see that the first residential class that they've been looking at is more student resi. There are some sort of lower cost, medium cost funds that are coming through the ranks as well, but it's not like the bulk of the industry. It's relatively small. In the US, there are some big funds looking at student housing as well. I know that you guys are probably chatting to a few of them as well. But what you have, luckily in the student resi is parents, as you say, who are paying rent.
Right.
But even in the co-living space, and we're looking at a joint strategy with you guys to be a bit flex between, say, the 18 to 30-year-old mark, I guess, in sort of our target area, is massive employers in the likes of Facebook, Oracle in Redwood City. You've got
Apple.
Some of the world's best universities in and around California, some of them close to Long Beach that you guys, maybe you can take us like a little bit about the universities there and your strategy around acquiring assets. How close do they need to be? And just a little bit about your rationale around buying buildings close to universities.
Yeah. I think, we like to stay within about a mile of campus. It's a reasonable walk or a reasonable bike. We don't have a lot of competition in our markets because before the ADU laws were passed, these were all single family house neighborhoods where it's not really viable for the most part to rent to students. And so we're very early in the wave and we probably could get away with going further away from campus and still getting rental demand, but we try and be very disciplined about staying to where the students could, conceivably walk or bike to campus and kind of, pivoting back to the co-living that you're talking about. Excuse me. The co-living, I think, is a really interesting model that's underserved. People are living in roommate living already. Co-living seems like a new thing, but if you're young or know young people, you realize this is how people are living, but in a disorganized way. It's unintentional. It's somebody has a house and they rent out a few back bedrooms. We're just answering that demand in a professional intentional, purpose-built way with our physical product, with what Neighborgood's doing from a management perspective. And yet it's both very high rent in terms of, wow, we can get, $1,500 to $2,000 per bedroom. But if you think about from the individual's perspective, if you get a studio or a one bed, the cheapest in Redwood City you're going to pay is $3,200, $3,500, right? You're not going to find anything for less than $3,000. So having a nice, clean space, professionally built, professionally managed, organized for under $2,000 is a tremendous value proposition. And there's a lot of high paid tech, and tech adjacent workers in corporate housing who, are, and you've seen it. We've seen it in our initial lease up success on the Redwood City portfolio that there's tremendous demand for that. It's actually, and I think with the student housing and with the co-living, it's somewhat of a recession resistant product. The students don't go anywhere during the recession. The co-living, that's subject to the job market fluctuations, but it's at the same time I don't want to say class C because it's not from a physical operational product, but from a cost perspective, it is the lower end, right? If I'm worried about layoffs at my company, but I'm still employed, do I go for the $3,200 a month one bed myself, or do I live in the $1,800 a month co-living bedroom that's still very comfortable? And I think that's the demand we were answering for a long time, but till we partnered with Neighborgood, it was very much just that, and just they're affordable bedrooms, so people are going to take them. But we're excited about what partnering with you guys is. You're actually bringing something else to the table in terms of the connected city, in terms of the spirit and the vibe of the whole thing, in terms of the user experience. And so I think that, like you say, the PropCo side, the fact that we're able to build this to a 7.5 cap, that is where primarily the value is being derived from. But let's not just settle for that. Let's do something cool. Let's make the neighborhood good. Let's make the future good. Let's make this experience good for those people. So that's, we're just super jazzed to be working with you
100%.
for that reason.
Thank you. We appreciate it so much.
Yeah.
We ask our guests one question at the end of every episode.
Oh boy.
And it is about anyone or any company that you can think of that is bringing good to the world that you think might be worth sharing with our audience. If there's any off the top of your mind, it would be awesome if you could share a story.
Does it have to be real estate related?
No.
I think Elon Musk and his, I think he's incredible. And I'm reading his book for the second time, and every podcast he's on, I try and listen to, and he's just in so many different verticals of industries and from a point of trying to do good for humanity, it seems like. So it fires me up. Yeah. And he's from here.
Awesome. Guys, thank you so much for being with us today. It has been awesome spending time with you. We're looking forward to a really good future together and continuing our expansion across both Redwood City, San Fran, and hopefully Long Beach.
And beyond.
And looking forward to the future, man. Awesome to have you.
Thanks for having us.
Cool, man.
Super.
Thank you. Cheers, guys.
Thanks.